Click on Charlie. You guys want to sit over here for now?
Sure.
You can see the screen and stuff.
Sure.
He was all fun. That's what you guys
I'm
were
gonna count here your stuff.
Jim, that's what you guys are doing.
Oh, really?
Can I send you one? Looks good? Yeah. I don't want to show you one.
Yeah. We're having a problem with projector. He thinks the bulb is burning out with mentioned that. We can't just go up there and change it. Amy, do you have extra copies out there of the annual meeting booklet?
I have mine, I think there were a lot of people.
No, we have plenty. I just want to make sure people got them.
I know.
Yeah. Do you think we'd be better off sitting down there with our computers? I'd love to do that. Can you pull it up on your computer?
Yeah.
You have a couple minutes.
Call the annual meeting to order. I'd like to thank everyone here in attendance. At this point, I'd like to call for the election of a chairperson for the annual meeting. Are there any nominations? Charlie,
I'll nominate David Steyer.
David Steyer has been nominated. Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? At this point, I'd ask for motion to close nominations and cast unanimous ballot for Dave Steyer for chairperson.
So moved.
Clint, is there a second?
I'll second.
Penny, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Appointment of parliamentarian and tellers. Our parliamentarian for this evening will be Tammy Schneider. Thank you, Tammy, for agreeing to help us. Our tellers will be Jamie Trista and Sam Hoyt. Thanks, Jamie and Sam. Recognition of current and former board members. So, do you want me to introduce Joe? Or do you want to? Or?
Sure, maybe you could have them all stand up.
Yep, we'll start with myself, Dave Steyer, Jim Swanson, Amy Riddle Swanson. Gotta find everybody now. Charlie Schneider, Cliff Moses, Tommy Hughesby, Penny Bursted, and Chris Freeman. Where's Chris? I guess Chris isn't here. Okay, and we do have at least one former board member, Dan Paulson, and Margaret Brush as well. Did I miss anybody?
Tammy Schneider.
Charlie's gonna come after me. Okay, thank you all for coming. Here's Chris. Chris Freeman.
No running in school.
Hey, wait, you don't have to be here.
Okay, in your booklet, did anybody not get a booklet on the annual meeting when it came in? In there contains our annual meeting minutes from last year. We do have one correction. The fourth paragraph down, it says Chairman Paulson, it should be Chairman Earl Swanson. Appointed Dave Steyer's parliamentarian, etc. Are there any other corrections or additions to that? If not, we'll be approved as corrected. Treasurer's report and audit summary. Want to do the?
Go ahead.
That's my old one. It's stink.
You want me to read the treasurer's report?
Dave, would you like the treasurer's report read, or would you like it included as part of the presentation?
I think included as part of the presentation.
Okay. So if there's no objection, we'll provide the presentation and then approve the treasurer's report and then have a hearing on the budget. Are there any objections to that? Okay. Nate, am I on? Okay, thank you. So let's see here. So again, thank you everyone for attending tonight's budget hearing and annual meeting. We're very happy to be able to have this at our school district this year. It seems like we take these kinds of things for granted until you have a worldwide pandemic and meeting in person becomes not as common. I apologize for some of the technical difficulties. Once you know it, that the night we have the annual meeting, the bulb on the projector that's way up in the ceiling has burnt out. So Nate may try to turn it on and off. So our visual representations tonight are going to be somewhat limited, and I apologize for that. We will put the annual meeting slides on the school district website, and they'll be available for you to review after the meeting. Dave already introduced the members of the Board of Education, and I would like to remind everyone of our mission statement. The school district of the Menomonie area, by embracing the unique needs and using the strengths of our diverse community, is dedicated to preparing all students to become lifelong learners, caring individuals, and responsible citizens. The presenters tonight will be me, Dr. Joe Zadowski, the superintendent of the school district, and Leah Theater, the director of business services for our school district. A few points of the demographics for our schools. We have 3,406 students, one district administrator, one assistant superintendent for curriculum instruction, Brian Segwin, he's here tonight. We have 7 directors, 7 principals, 1 athletic director and assistant principal, 2 assistant principals, 244 teachers, 69 paraeducators, and 106 support staff. I will say these numbers have increased. A few things about the 2019-2020 year in review. Our student achievement met the expectations of the state accountability report cards. We received very positive results from the employee perception survey that was administered last fall. We increased classroom budgets and improved compensation systems to better recruit and retain district staff members. We improved school safety through state grants. We have ongoing professional development with special emphasis on bullying, professional learning communities, and innovative instruction. We had a tremendous year for student athletics and activities, and we successfully navigated through the COVID-19 shutdown by providing technology devices to our families, free meals for all of our kids, and doing our best to keep students and staff safe. We have a number of facilities in our school district. Most of you know them. We have 1 high school and 1 middle school, 5 elementary schools, the Administrative Service Center, and Bjornson Environmental Center. Last year, our major projects and capital improvements included replacing outdated phones across the school district, improving the entrance at the middle school to make it more secure, and to improve aging effects, I guess I would say. We added student devices and hotspots for grades kindergarten through 5th grade. We replaced devices for grades 6 through 12, added lighting to the Menomonie High School sports complex, drained the pool here at Menomonie High School and fixed the circulation pumps, improved the pool timing system, improved the camera system at ASC. We obtained plexiglass barriers for clerical areas all across the school district and resealed parking lots at some of our school sites. Major changes that we're having for 2020, 2021, it really is all about COVID. As you're aware, the board has been working all summer. The administrative team has been working around the clock to prepare to reopen our schools responsibly. We created a virtual school option, which we just talked about. We have almost 600 students that will be obtaining their education through our virtual school during the first semester. We've had significant staffing increases to help work through the pandemic, but we will continue to work on our strategic plan in the 5 different pillars that are listed in the plan. We have an LED lighting project plan for Knapp Elementary School. We have new Dean of Student positions at the middle school and high school, primarily to combat issues related to bullying and other disciplinary concerns. And we have new principals at Downsville, Wakanda, and an assistant principal at the high school. So now it's my pleasure to turn this over to Leah Theater, our Director of Business Services. Leah, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me on my mic? Okay, I'm going to start out by reviewing the treasurer's report, the summary of transactions for the general fund, and this is on page 6 of the annual meeting booklet. The general fund revenues for 1920 were $39,025,784.17, and expenditures totaled $35,886,883.38 for a net difference of $3,156,979. The summary of transactions for the general fund, special project funds, debt service, capital projects, food service, community service, and the benefit trust fund and package fund. Total revenues for all of those funds combined for 1920 is $55,379,024.33. The total expenditures for all funds for 2019-20 totaled $49,644,002.46. Our operational cash summary, including the general fund, special project fund, food service, and community service fund, for cash and investments balance. The beginning balance on July 1st of 2019 was $8,671,966.85. Ending June 30th, 2020 was $10,269,914.99. Due from other governments, $1,104,057.31, and ending on June 30th, 2020 was $1,237,928.94. And our taxes receivable for July 1st of 2019 was $5,492,018.52. Our ending June 30th, 2020 taxes receivable was $5,734,488.86. And there was no short-term borrowing required for cash flow purposes. Moving on to the debt service summary, the referendum long-term summary. In 2019-20, the payments for the referendum long-term notes and bonds total $2,300,000 on the principal and $978,212.50 on the interest. The long-term notes and bonds indebtedness as of June 30th, 2020 totaled $29,337,514, which consisted of $31,300,000 in principal and $8,037,514 in interest. For the non-referendum long-term summary in 2019-2020, the principal payment on these bonds is $495,000. The interest payment was $50,970.82. And ending cash balance in the non-referendum debt fund as of June 30th, 2020 was $44,186.69, which will be used for future scheduled loan payments. The benefit trust fund summary, the ending balance in the benefit trust fund as of June 30th, 2020 was $6,123,644.80. Earnings on investment in 1920 totaled $106,626.60, and disbursements in 1920 totaled $1,496,558.92, and American United Life is our trust administrator. The levy of school tax, the tax rates are tentative and subject to review later in October. Approval is requested for the tentative tax levy of $12,323,867 for operations, $3,857,700 for debt service, and $330,000 for community services, for a total levy of $16,514,567.
Okay, thank you, Leah. Are there any questions? Ask for a motion to approve the treasurer's report.
So moved.
Penny, is there a second? Brian, any discussion?
I have a question.
Margaret?
So later on, we're going to be asked to approve the tax levy. So when we're approving this, are we just approving the numbers here or what?
So Margaret's question was, are we just approving the report or are we also approving the tax levy?
Yes.
This approval would only be approving the report. The tax levy would be considered under Resolution A, the adoption of the tax levy. Thanks for the clarification, Margaret.
Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we'll move on to the budget.
Okay, so moving back to the budget presentation, we always start out the presentation by defining what the budget is. And it's an estimate of income, expected income, and expenses for a given period in the future. On the next slide, the total budget. As you know, the total budget includes several major funding categories. Those are all broken down individually. On page 7 of your annual meeting booklet, it explains the different funds that we have. There are literally hundreds of line items that go into this budget, and the total budget for the school district in 2020-2021 is expected to be $54.2 million. Moving on to the next slide, Wisconsin school finance. As you know, state statute limits how much revenue may be raised through operational tax levy and general state aids. We are in the second year of our biennial budget, so the numbers listed here in the presentation tonight are actual numbers written into the state statutes. The general state aid and school levy credits increased 6.69% in 1920, and were projecting or estimating them to increase 3.01% in 2021. The increase in reimbursement for special education costs was 25.02% in 1920, and we're estimating that to be 30% in 2021. However, that is a some certain pot, and so that allocation can fluctuate depending on increased costs for all districts in the state. The per pupil aid is $742 per pupil in 1920 and each year thereafter as written into the biennial budget. So we know that's what our per pupil allocation will be in 1920 unless the state decides to change that. Same with the supplemental per pupil aid. Last year in 1920 was $3.36, and it's estimated to be around $3 in 2021. That pot of money is also some certain, so it just depends what's going on at the state, what our allocation will actually be. And then the revenue limit is $175 per member in 1920 and $179 per member in 2021 and zero for each year thereafter. Again, biennial budget, next year that allocation could change depending on what they approve in their next biennial budget. The Wisconsin School Choice Voucher Program was enacted in 2013-14. This program allows parents to receive a voucher to enroll their children in private schools. And state law requires that the resident school district pay for students through a reduction in their state aid. The state pays that aid directly to the private school, and resident districts receive a non-recurring revenue limit adjustment equal to that per FTE choice payment. What that does is it allows the resident district to replace the general state aid reduction through an increased property tax levy. In 1920, the school district of Menomonie had one private school participate in the program. The impact on that was 8 FTE, full-time equivalent, K-8 students. The 1920 rate per student was $8,046, so the total impact was $64,368. In 2021, I'm estimating, well, we still have the one private school participating, but I'm estimating that the per pupil FTE will be 12 K-8 students. The estimated rate will be $8,264 for a total of $99,168. It's just an estimate at this time because we won't be notified by DPI until the October 15th release of information from them on those countable students. Moving on to property values in our district, we have a graph here of the past 5 years. You can see our equalized values have increased slightly over the years. For budgeting purposes, because we start this budget so early in the year, we assume that the equalized values will remain the same for budgeting purposes. The actual values don't come out until October when those are certified. We do get an early estimate about mid-August from the Wisconsin Department of Revenue. We do know that through past experience that number changes, and so they're estimating that value to be increased by approximately 7%, but there's really no way for us to know until they actually certify those values what that increase will actually be until October. The levy analysis, we have both last year's information, the final levy, and then the preliminary 2021 levy. You'll see the general fund is showing an increase of $514,437. Debt service has a decrease. We have paid off some of that referendum debt, and so there's a decrease there of $707,288. And then our community service fund has an increase of $71,000, and that's to add a youth services officer position, but I'll explain further about that position later on in the presentation. The total levy that we're proposing is $514,567, and that's a decrease over last year of $121,851, or 0.73%. The tax rate history, again, we're estimating the mill rate to be $8.46. You see from the chart, there's been slight decreases over the past few years. The projected decrease is 0.06 from the 1920 school year. It's likely to decrease based on our state aid certification and property values. If our property values do go up, we should see a decrease in our mill rate.
I would like to add that this past year was a very unique budget year for us with the shutdown. So we ended up adding the fund balance more than what we typically had been. And the way the finance system works is that if you don't spend the dollars, the following year your state aid can be reduced because your state aid is partially dependent on how much you spend the previous year. So we are going to be watching this very closely. There's a lot of other factors, like Leah mentioned, the property valuation. If it goes up 7%, like some of the initial forecasting is suggesting, that definitely would drive down our mill rate. However, there's other factors too, such as enrollment factors that could come into play here. But regardless, we have a pretty good decreasing trend on our mill rate here in Menomonie.
Could I ask a question? Clarify something. So if we don't spend as much money, we don't get as much state aid, but then if we spend extra the following year, doesn't that eventually work out?
So Margaret's question was, if we don't spend and don't get state aid, if and when we eventually spend those funds, are you aided at that point? The answer is most likely yes. It's hard to predict what the funding formula will be. Our funding formula in Wisconsin has been challenged in court before, it's been upheld. So I would anticipate the answer would be yes.
Okay, on the next slide, we're going to review the 2020-2021 major budget adjustments, major adds to the budget when we created this and approved on June 1st were salary increases of 1.92%, health insurance at a 3% increase, the staffing plan at that time was built in, per pupil state aid increase, K-5 student devices and hotspots, the 612 student technology device refresh replacement lease, and the Menomonie Middle School secured entranceway, and some COVID-19 related costs as best we could estimate at that time. Reductions to the budget include the lighting project or phase 2 of the sports complex, and then a completion of some capital projects, the phone system, the outdated phones and camera system, and resurfacing parking lots, etc. And then completion of round 1 of the school safety grant, and there's partial completion of round 2 in the school safety grant. We'd like to talk a little bit about the COVID-19 budget impact for the 2021 school year. We are receiving funds, ESSER grant program funds, and that stands for Elementary Secondary School and Emergency Relief Fund. It's part of the Coronavirus Aid Relief and Economic Security Act from the federal government, and it is funneled through DPI. So DPI notified us of our allocation, and it runs from March 1st of 2020 through September of 2022. And our total allocation that we can spend during that time period is $482,931. We did not spend any of those funds in the 1920 school year, so we will be budgeting those funds in this year. Some of the allowable uses for the ESSER funds include preparedness and response to COVID-19, outreach services, to special populations, addressing long-term closures, education technology, mental health supports, addressing after-school and summer activities, and then continued staff and employment. The operating budget for revenues and expenses, if we take a look at 1920 compared to 2021, again, the 1920 data is unaudited. Our audit won't be completed until late November. But at the time we created this budget, we did anticipate a balanced preliminary budget for the 2021 school year. The revenue increase from last year to this year was 3.06%, expenses 12.13%. But with the additional staffing plan that we actually just approved tonight, it's more realistic that we will be, seeing a deficit spend next year related to all the additional COVID expenditures that we're going to see. The 2021 operating revenue, we always do a pie chart that just kind of shows the breakdown and where the revenue comes from. The majority of revenues, 60% come from our state general equalization aid and per pupil aid. The next highest portion of the pie is 31%, and that's local property taxes. And then the smaller amounts are listed there. You have other local revenues that we bring in along with federal grants and other state aids and grants. The 2021 operating expenses, the lion's share at 72% go to salaries and benefits for our staff, and that includes the special education staff as well. The next, the second highest category are purchase services and communication. That includes items of, instructional and non-instructional staff training, utilities, facilities maintenance, all of those types of purchase services. And then the smaller amounts are listed there for supplies, books, equipment, and other miscellaneous expenses. Our Fund 10 fund balance history. If you take a look at the chart, it's showing a slight increase over the years, and then in the 1920 school year, there's a significant jump. And like Joe had mentioned, because we closed schools in March, we had significant cost savings as well, and so that contributed to that larger surplus. But again, with the added costs that we're going to have due to COVID-19, the additional staffing needs and supplies, equipment that we need to purchase, more than likely we'll have to use a good share of those savings to pay for those additional costs. Our Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 46, as you know, we had a referendum, school referendum in 2013. The district then developed a 30-year capital maintenance plan. That fund 46 was then created to save for those capital maintenance needs. At the end of the 1920 school year, the fund balance in this fund was $4,796,617.96. We're planned to make a $720,000 payment in this school year, the 2021 school year. So the estimated fund balance is $5,516,617.96. Knowing we would have additional COVID-19 expenditures this year, we did actually make an excess payment in the 1920 school year to make up for this payment in the event we're unable to make this payment due to the higher costs. So we did look ahead for that, and we made that payment in advance in the event that we won't be able to make this payment this year. At least we made up for that. And our post-employment Post-employment benefits is designated in Fund 73. In addition to funding half of the employee's state retirement, WRS, the school district also provides local post-employment benefits to most of our full-time employees that are eligible. Those include health insurance premiums that are paid by the district, contributions to health reimbursement accounts, and cash stipends. As if you've been with the district for a while, you know the district has made difficult changes to reduce the OPEB debt and to move away from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. And those savings from new hires should be enough to fund the benefits accrued by the SDMA retirees. In the next slide, you'll see how that has made a significant impact. Our OPEB liability back on July 1st of 2009 was $28.9 million. Our fund balance was $351,507. Our OPEB liability as of July 1st, 2020, which is unaudited at this time, the complete study won't be done until later this fall, but it's looking like our liability will be about $7.2 million, and our fund balance is $6,123,645. So a significant impact, and we are not looking at this time for an additional contribution into Fund 73 that's planned for 2021. Moving on to our Community Service Fund, our Fund 80. This fund is used to cover community education offerings, middle school age activities. The Boys and Girls Club is funded through this fund, and then a proposed community youth services officer. Revenues for Fund 80 is generated from a levy outside of the revenue limit, as well as local participation fees for taking classes and such. The Fund 80 portion of the tax levy is approximately 2% of the overall levy. Fund 80 is projected to increase by the $71,000 for that officer position for 2021. But we also had a surplus of $28,516 in 1920. Again, that's unaudited, but knowing that we had this large of a surplus, I would say we'd be definitely looking at a possible reduction recommendation for our Fund 80 levy in October when we recommend the board setting a levy.
Leah, if I could just jump in for a second, and
Sure.
I know Margaret and I have had many conversations over the years about Fund 80, and for a number of years we have approved the levy that includes the Fund 80 at the annual meeting, and then once we're able to sort the budget out and get the numbers back from the state, we've been able to recommend a lower Fund 80 levy, and I would anticipate a similar thing to happen this year. The board ultimately will set the levy in the budget in October.
And then this is just a graph, a chart of our tax levy history for Community Service Fund 80. And you'll see it's kind of gone up and down, but has stayed pretty steady around 250 to 262,000. Again, we proposed an increase for that youth services officer position this year, but more than likely we will be recommending a reduced levy for the 2021 school year. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, this time we'll have our hearing
The
on
microphone there.
the budget. If anybody has any questions or about anything that they talked about, we can address them now. Okay. No questions? Okay. We move on to the resolutions then?
Yeah.
Okay, the first resolution that we have is to adopt tax levy for general debt service and community service funds. Proposed motion that to be levied upon the taxable property of the school district of the Menomonie area, the sum of $16,514,566 for the operation of district schools and for the discharge of long-term debt obligations for the 2020-2021 school year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion, is there a second? Did you catch it? Mary? Is there a second? Jim? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Our next resolution is line number 10, resolution B, authorize annual compensation for Board of Education members. Proposed motion that members of the Board of Education be compensated with annual salaries as follows. Board President, $1,000. All other members, $800 each. Do I have a motion? Brian, is there a second?
Second.
Mary? Thank you. Any discussion? Mary? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution C, authorize the reimbursement of travel expenses for Board of Education members. Proposed motion that members of the Board of Education be compensated for actual and necessary expenses incurred in the performance of duties. Do I have a motion? Jim, is there a second? Tammy? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any other business? At this time, if anybody has any questions or anything that they'd like to bring up, now is the time to do that. Margaret,
I have a resolution.
Let's, give her the mic.
we'll give you the mic, Margaret. Okay.
I have a is this working?
Yes.
Yep.
I'll take a little bit.
So I have a resolution, resolution D. I was concerned about the severity of the censure statement. I thought that filing the disorderly conduct charge was more than warranted. And so this is my resolution. Whereas more than one school board member used the F word at the August 10th, 2020 school board meeting. Whereas more than one school board member displayed disorderly conduct at the August 10th, 2020 school board meeting. Whereas the public censure of board member James Swanson passed on October 14th, 2020, directed the district administrator to file a disorderly conduct complaint with the police against Swanson for his use of the F word, but not against Penny Bernstead, who shouted UFU at Swanson. Be it resolved, the district administrator withdraw the disorderly conduct complaint against Swanson.
We have a motion, is there a second? Dan Paulson? Any discussion? Anything else you'd like to say, Margaret? You good?
Unless other people have something to say.
I have something to say.
Helen?
I'm, first things first, I vehemently deny using the F word. I did not do so. And the fact that this is the first time that my name has been brought into this is quite shocking and concerning to me. I wish that the public would have spoken up to me previous. It was not me. There are a lot of videotapes and there are a lot of different videotaped situations. I'm rather taken aback, but if I would have done so, first things first, there were multiple board members sitting at the board table with me that day that would have called me out on my behavior, and I would have immediately apologized. So I'm highly concerned and it didn't happen. That was not the situation. I had Dave Steyer next to me, who would have immediately called me out on that behavior, and Tricia Thompson, who is not with us this evening, who would have also, I would have hoped, spoken with me. So I did not say it, and this is ridiculous.
I brought the,
Just wait, Margaret, we'll get to the mic, okay? Margaret?
I reviewed this several times. I put it on this data stick. And if you would like, I will email a copy to every member of the school board. You definitely did this. Unless Steve Hansen went and tampered with the tape. But regardless, whether you did it or not,
No.
I will send a copy to everyone on the school board. But regardless of whether you did this or not, calling the police for using the F word and putting it on a criminal record is way out of bounds. That's what's out of bounds. So I will say, if you would like to amend this and take your name out of it, that's fine, but I will send a copy to every member of the school board, and you tell me that I'm wrong.
Any other discussion? Dan?
I believe the Denton County News and reporting on the censorship hearing quoted a school board member as admitting that one of the board members, another board member, did make a comment such as that. And the comment was quoted, and the paper quoted the school board member saying that it didn't rise to the same level as Mr. Swanson's because of supposedly Mr. Swanson's repeated behaviors or previous behaviors. So another school board member was quoted in the paper as making that, acknowledging that. I don't know if the paper was wrong and misquoted that school board member or not. That's what was reported in the newspaper.
Margaret?
Okay, in terms of this resolution, out of respect for Penny, who denies that it's her on this data stick that shows the meeting, I would amend this to change the, take Penny's name out and replace it with another board member.
Dan, are you open to a friendly second to that amendment?
Harlan? Yes.
Okay, Charlie?
I'm not sure, Dan, but it may be myself that you're referring to, that was quoted in the newspaper, because I know that I have said that, that another board member, I don't know that it was another board member. It was someone else in the room. Someone else in the room said it. I've listened to it many times, Margaret. Everyone's seen it. 20,000 people have seen it. So there's no need to email it to us. We've seen it over and over again. I've slowed it down to 25%. I've slowed it down to 50%. I've slowed it down to 75%. Somebody said it. I don't know what it was. I can't personally say that it was what you said it was. I don't know who said it. Regardless of who said it, I'll stand by what I said earlier. The difference is when someone says it once and causes a disturbance once, that's something that other board members should call them out on, right? But when someone does it over and over and over again, it rises to a different level. That's what happened that night. It rose to a different level. And that's why I voted in the affirmative on that motion, because it was a different level. If another board member said it, then they should be called out on it. Yes, I agree. But should they be censured? Should they have the same things happen to them as someone who does it over and over and over again? I, for one, would say no.
The thing that I would like to add too is that reminder, there were a lot of people in the room and there's no proof that another board member actually said that. So I think we have to be careful what we imply because we don't know for sure. It was a board member. Margaret?
I'm wondering if I have a different copy of the tape. I have the one that was on the community program, the thing that Steve Hansen did. Were you looking at something else? Did you look at Steve Hansen's?
Yeah.
I'm thinking perhaps your computer software isn't as good as mine. But regardless, I said, I'm fine with taking Kenny's name off of here, but the whole point is, I'm not talking about removal of censure or anything, just that one paragraph. I believe it's out of line to have a public, a disorderly conduct just for using the F word. I mean, what are you going to do at baseball games or football games if someone uses an F word? I'm just saying that's out of line. And I would hope that this would be, that you would approve removing this and not, leave everything else intact, but there shouldn't be a disorderly conduct just for using an F word.
Joe?
I just want to add to this, the discussion that anybody who watched that video could have reported that conduct to the police. And the school board does not determine the police investigation. Ultimately, the police, law enforcement would decide whether or not the conduct rises to a certain level.
Dan, did you have a comment?
I guess
Jamie's bringing you the mic.
I think there's a problem with the issue of asserting that this is a repeated behavior without documentation. And I'd like to see board minutes where the chair has made, without, you don't have, according to Robert's Rules of Order, you have certain ways of dealing with discipline on the board. And you, I don't know of any place where you or any of the other board members have utilized Robert's Rules of Order and discipline. And I don't think you even use Robert's Rules of Order appropriately in this circumstance either. But to say that there is a repeated pattern here, there's no documentation to substantiate that. You could say that, but where's the documentation? Thank you very much.
Carl?
Steve has the documentation on his website. Watch the tapes, it's there. I've been involved, I've only been on the board for a few short months. This is the fourth time that I've seen cursing, abusive language to other board members. It's that, watch it, it's there. And you were on the board, you've seen it.
Okay, I'll remind everyone, we have a motion on the floor, the amended motion condemns, I don't know if you want to read it one more time, Margaret, before we actually take a vote of the members here.
Let's just do, here's the result of my motion.
Hold on.
We'll get to the mic, Margaret, please.
Oh, I'm sorry.
When we do get ready to vote, we have tellers, Jamie and Brian, that will hand out paper ballots with pens.
Yes, the be it resolved, the district administrator withdraw the disorderly conduct complaint against Swanson.
That's your amended motion?
Well, I have these,
These whereases aren't really necessary.
Okay. So the motion then would be for the superintendent, district administrator to draft the disorderly conduct charges against Jim Swanson. That's the motion. Is there a second? Dan? Dan Paulson. Any further discussion? I'm sorry, Sam, you were talking, not Brett, sorry. Okay, we'll hand out the vote, the paper ballot. If you vote yes, that is to approve the motion and remove the charges of disorderly conduct. If you vote no, it is to defeat the motion. You must be a member of the Menomonie School District, elector of the Menomonie School District to vote, so.
What is an elector?
Do you vote for the Menomonie School Board election?
Yes.
Okay, that's an elector.
Dave?
Yes?
Then the point is, I'm not talking about removing the censure or anything like that. It's just that one item from the censure statement.
Nate, did you have a question? Okay. Again, a reminder, the yes vote is to remove the disorderly conduct charge. A no vote is to defeat the motion and to leave the censure motion intact as is.
You want to ask?
Anybody not get a ballot?
I'm gonna bring around the hand sanitizer too, if anybody wants any.
Steve,
Thank you.
yours?
No, they handed them out.
Hand sanitizer.
Okay, as the tellers, did everybody receive a ballot? Anybody did not? Okay, as the tellers to please, a yes is to remove the disorderly conduct charge, a no vote is to leave the censure motion intact and to defeat the emergency. While they're collecting the ballots, is there anything else that anybody wanted to talk about, school district business? I want to take this opportunity to applaud Joe and the staff, everybody involved with the district administrator's office, the ASC building, and all of our teachers, all the way through all the buildings for the great job they've done. We appreciate all the work that our lead team has put together and planning for reopening this year. It's been a ton of work. I don't believe there's been a day that has gone by hardly that Joe hasn't been involved, at least from my perspective, and a lot of the planning stuff going on. It's been very intense. So we appreciate everything that you guys have done and the support that we have from the community has been tremendous. So.
Thanks, Dave. I got one.
Any other questions, comments, things that you like that were good this year? I mean, we have positive stuff too.
Is there anybody that I didn't get a ballot from?
Sam, make sure you use hand sanitizer. We can't afford to lose you for a couple weeks. Looks like Dan has something, Dave.
I'm sorry, Dan.
I have a question about the youth liaison officer. You
Just a second.
for that in the district, is that It's been approved by the city.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yeah, I just want to know if the police or the youth liaison officer has been approved other than by the district.
Yes, I'm very happy to report that after years of working together, the city has approved an additional youth services officer. So we're very excited for that relationship to be expanded this year.
Any other questions? Margaret?
So is the funding for that position that was originally funded through transfer of service back around 2001, is that still in Fund 10?
There are two positions. It is funded through Fund 10 and Fund 80.
No, I mean, in 2001 or 2, we had two positions, one at the middle school and one at the high school. And they were both funded through transfer of service. And after a couple of years, we discontinued the one at the middle school because it was felt that it wasn't that necessary. Or I think part of it was that the city lost its grant. But those dollars were never taken out of Fund 10. So we're going to be funding that second position both with the transfer of service dollars that are still in there, plus the community service fund.
I guess I would have to look more into that, Margaret, being so long ago, well before my time here. But what my understanding of transfer of service is that it's a Fund 10 expenditure, so it could be used for anything. Leah, do you have anything to add?
No, you are correct.
Any other questions?
But the tax levy was increased as a non-recurring increase of the revenue limit for that position. And I think we must have millions of dollars that have been used to increase the revenue limits. When we put money into, when students come in and need the service, we increase this, but when they leave, we leave it in the budget. And that's something we struggled with when I was on the board, because budgets are really tight, and it was legal, but perhaps not as ethical as we would have liked it to be.
Thank you, Margaret.
I will say, just to add on to that a little bit, Margaret, I remember when I first got on board, our mill rates after the referendum and through that period were over 10. The mill rate was, and now, 10.3, 10.4, somewhere in the neighborhood. Now our mill rate is around 8.5 ballpark, so kudos to Joe and the team. From a fiscal standpoint, I think they've done a great job over the years, keeping our district in the black and being mindful of district spending and taxpayer dollars. Okay, the tellers are still counting. Any other questions? Comments? Once we finish the annual meeting, we'll adjourn that, and then we'll reconvene our board meeting. Okay, we had, I'll just say the motion did fail, so. I don't know if you want me to read the vote totals or not. So the motion failed.
Read the vote total.
19 against, 11 for, 1 abstention. Okay. Any other business? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the annual meeting. Tammy, is there a second? Penny? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. As I said, we'll reconvene in 5 minutes for our regular board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we're resuming the meeting. Jamie, would you please take roll? Okay, we're resuming the meeting. Jamie, would you please take roll?
Here.
We texted him, he should be in shortly.
Here?
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here. Okay, we have a quorum to conduct business. We're on action item C, approve 66.0301 special education cooperative agreement between the SDMA and the Oakland Area School District. Do I have a motion? Penny, is there a second?
Second.
Clint? Joe? Anything you want to add since last?
No, just, this is a typical agreement for our school district to provide specialized services.
Anything from any other board members? Charlie?
I'm searching for it here, but I'm not finding, I see the cost, but how much time are they providing?
Unfortunately, Charlie, I don't know the exact answer to that. Tony wasn't able to join us tonight. I know that she calculates that out and then works with Eau Claire. It's prorated based on the contract amount. I don't know if the exact time is listed in here.
Is that something you could get to us, Joel? Or have, Tony get to us at some point?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Any other questions?
Yeah, my question would be along that line, how does this compare to previous contracts?
These are specialized contracts. For this one specifically is dealing with audiology,
Yeah, I see that.
a specialized service. So I don't know that I'd really say they're typical in terms of grouping them all together. But we do typically have contracts like this for providing services if we don't have a full-time staff member to provide that service to a child.
Any other questions? Okay, Jamie, let's go. You can just let me know.
Not yet.
That's fine.
Motion carried 7-0, and I was one not present.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. Item 3D, approve resolution regarding retirement of Native American mascots, symbols, images, logos, and nicknames in public schools. Is there a motion to approve? Jim, is there a second?
Second.
Amy, any discussion? We did talk about this at our last meeting as well. Jim?
This, voting for this is a great way to help improve the mental health and connections of our Native American students to the schools in the state.
Any other discussion? Clint?
I wasn't able to get this to upload, so is there any changes made to this since last meeting? I don't believe so, correct? Jill? Yeah.
I guess the concern I have is the same that I voiced last year, and I just think that our school district should worry about our own problems rather than, things that other districts are doing. I do know that this resolution went to WASB last year. Menomonie passed it by a 4-2 vote. It went to WASB last year and was defeated at the state convention. It is here again for approval at our district. Any other questions or discussion? Amy?
Again, I remind you that the Washington Redskins have changed their logo. It's national. The Leinenkugel Brewery Company has taken Indian maiden off of their cans. This is a national movement, and I think it is what Jim said. I think it's really important that we pay attention to our Native American brothers and sisters and help them with their mental health as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Any other? Chris?
Okay, yeah, and we did discuss this last year. And I think they brought up some information that I think made it a little more, even more obvious that this is the right thing to do, by bringing up Act 31 and the obligations we have as educators, not to send any mixed signals on this. You can't have a state mandate that tries to raise the bar on Native American awareness at the same time you have schools that denigrate them. And as an educator, I can't help but point out how problematic it is when we send one signal in the classroom, but then culture sends you something else. It's one step forward and 2 steps back, because it demonstrates that the cultural reality is that it doesn't matter. No matter how good your teachers are, no matter how good the curriculum, when you have social reality and a cultural reality that tells you that that doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. And when we think of our students going out and participating in schools, it's not just that they participate in schools and see this, it's a climate of what public education is about in the state of Wisconsin. There's been arguments made in this board before that, oh, I knew a Native American guy who thought it was okay, so it's okay. It's not okay. There are no Native American tribal councils that have said, we really would like it if more schools had more Native American mascots. Their argument is invalid and it's unrealistic. And to make another argument that's happened in the school board, that, well, when we first did that, we thought we were, honoring the tribes. That's crazy. And I'm not saying that anyone's board is racist, but that's an argument that racists use in order not to act. So those ideas, and to use that on this board as a reason why we should not do the right thing, I think that sort of demeans the discussion as to what we're about. It's not that Menomonie did the right thing for us. We did the right thing. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Any other discussion? Okay, Jamie? Okay, motion failed, 3-5. Action item E, approve resolution regarding school district funding to ensure Act 31 compliance. Is there a motion? Jim? Is there a second? Chris? Any discussion? Jim, sorry.
It's more a request than a discussion, but I know part of Act 31, we're supposed to have a plan for implementing it in the district. I wonder if some point in time you can share that plan with us?
We discussed that at the last meeting, and we are shooting for October when we provide that other report to the board.
Okay.
Chris?
Was there anyone that argued, I can't remember in the last meeting, I don't think there was there anyone who argued that this was not the right thing to do? Like, is there something fundamentally problematic with this motion? I don't believe I heard any disagreement with this one, and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page on this.
I would say that, for myself personally, I don't know what Act 31 compliance is at the state level. And so I have a hard time supporting something that I don't know where everybody in the state is at. I think each district has to allocate their resources and where they think is best. But I would not be supporting it. Chris, or Clint first, then Chris.
I'm in support of the language of this. Like Dave said, I'll echo, I'm not 100% sure what the compliance of Act 31 is. I just want to make sure that we're giving focused our social studies teachers that, in government studies and economics, they're also focusing on our Constitution and everything else that goes with it, not just subsets of things. I do think it's important that everybody learns about their heritage, and I would be in support of this, but I just, it's just a subset too, so thanks.
Tanya?
And I can't open it. The reason why I support this one versus the prior one is that the language, there's an item in there that says that that resolution would also be promoting funding for it. Whereas the one in regards to one we just voted on has nothing to do with funding. So that's why this one I also would support.
Any other discussion? Chris?
And I too was not up to speed on Act 31, but I would note that it is linked in all the documents we've had, both at this meeting and the last meeting. We had a lot of opportunity to be able to educate ourselves on what it was all about. which I found incredibly fascinating, especially, and I'm always blown away by how good DPI is in Wisconsin. And so if you don't know by now, we really should take the time to educate ourselves on this one because it really is it's something I think we can all take pride in. And we can all be a part of. But in order to do that, we have to understand what it is. So I would encourage us to click on the links and follow them and do some education on that.
Charlie?
For myself on Act 31, I think it's a great idea, Chris. I don't know that I can support this resolution because what this resolution says is we're telling everyone else that they need to do better on Act 31. I don't know how we're doing on Act 31. I find it hard for me to tell someone else, you people need to do a better job when we don't know what we're doing, when we don't know how well we're doing. If this came to us after that report in October, I might feel differently about it, but I struggle to tell other districts that they should be doing something better that we don't know how we're doing on it. And David O'Connor, the person from DPI, is even quoted as saying that he doesn't want to make it punitive to districts that aren't following Act 31. He would rather point out that the Prescott School District, as an example, is exemplary in the way they follow Act 31. The Black River Falls School District does a great job, rather than being punitive towards districts. So he's not in full support of this resolution either. So I question that as well.
Clint, do you have any? Oh, sorry. Amy?
I'm not sure that it's like telling what other places to have to do this. I think it's set an example of, yes, we want Act 31 to be, to make sure all schools are compliant. We have Native Americans in our school that go to other places for sports and that kind of thing. Unfortunately, the last resolution did not fail. But in my mind, I think this is just something that shows us that we need to make sure that our education that we're teaching our kids is important. And yeah, maybe we don't know how it's done here, but this is a perfect opportunity to learn more about it and make sure that it's being complied with all across the state. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Chris?
And just for clarity, I don't think there's anything punitive here. I didn't think that was the case. I just heard it again. It doesn't take any punishment. It's an act of encouragement of Act 31 and what its messaging is. So I would think that the person you're referring to at DPI probably maybe wasn't thinking about this particular resolution because it doesn't involve any punishment.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Jane?
Motion passes 5-3.
Okay, motion carries on a 5-3 vote. Item 3F, approve resolution regarding expansion of affordable, accessible broadband in all Wisconsin communities, along with school district funding to ensure broadband access for students and staff. I have a motion to approve. Clint, is there a second? Chris? Discussion. Amy?
Just briefly, just to say, this is something we've all been wanting. Right now, it makes a lot of sense because we have students that are out there online, and I think it would provide equity for those who need the internet to do their work, either remotely from home or wherever they might be at. Thank you.
Anybody have any problems? Clint? So-
I don't have a problem, but if you're driving around the countryside in Dunn County, you do see that there is some expansion going out there. And my other comment is, isn't this nice? I want to point this out to the staff and the community members that are maybe watching this. I think this might be something we can all agree on. So it's kind of good.
Any other comments? Okay, Jamie? Motion carries 8-0. Okay, now we're moving into the discussion item portion of the agenda. We'll start with Joel with his COVID-19 report.
In the interest of time, I won't read through the entire report, but I think the highlights are that there's 154 confirmed cases in Dunn County. Actually it's 155 now. I wasn't able to get the updated number in there. And then the recovered cases too, I'm waiting to get the number. But you can see that our planning's ongoing. Our teachers started today, but we're looking forward to our students starting next week. Most of our focus is on the opening plans. Thank you.
Okay, moving on, any questions on that? Okay, item 4B, review updates to the SDMA reopening plan. Joel?
The updated reopening plan is linked in for the public and the board to see. A number of documents have been added, all the building level reopening plans, guidance for staff leave and reporting related to COVID-19, guidance for face coverings, which will be discussed next, contact tracing, cleaning and disinfecting, reopening school nutrition, instructional expectations, which includes guidance for daily classroom staff-student interactions, guidance for music, and then fall sports and student activities. The very first link is the new Wisconsin Department of Health Services guidance. We received that last week. That would have been really nice to have it back in June. However, our reopening plan is very well aligned with that. There's a call today with the state health department and statewide superintendents. There is a level of frustration that there has not been guidance provided by the state in terms of thresholds or metrics. That's something that superintendents across the state requested from DHS. Nothing was done. I have advocated that they still have a week, and it would be nice if there was some state level metric that could be followed. I understand that different levels of the state have different, or different areas of the state have different COVID levels. But, when we're talking about athletics, when we're talking about in-person instruction, when we're talking about all this stuff, I definitely think it should be localized or regionalized, but it'd be nice if people were using the same metrics to make those determinations. And it's put boards, superintendents, local health department directors, so I know they're frustrated as well. I consider it to be a colossal failure by the state.
Tanya?
I just have a quick question. The reopening plans are all based on buildings. Is there any consistency for some of like the major things like, some of the major things like drop-off time? It looked like Wapanda, for example, was like 8 a.m., whereas I think River Heights isn't gonna open their doors until 8:10. I understand very small amounts of time, but I know how important that time is for elementary teachers in the beginning of the day. Just didn't know if some of those structure-wise could have a same story, I guess.
Sure. No, it really isn't practical to have consistent drop-off times across the entire district. The buses arrive and leave different places at different times. I do know that the principals work with the staff and some of that can be flexed a little bit. But no, that's not something we're able to do without causing problems and more inequities than there are right now.
Chris?
Okay, just a couple questions. Just because some of the language isn't clear in some of the reopening plans. Like the language said that it's tied to, we will comply with the governor's masking order, but I think the governor's masking order, it's only good until September 28th. And it would be nice if we made that clear that yes, we're gonna be masking in the Menomonie School District area for the semester. Does that make sense? So it sounds like potentially that as soon as the masking order
stops taking effect on September 28th, that potentially then we will not require our students to be wearing masks in the school. And I know that's not a plan, but I believe that should be very clear to the families and to the kids and to the teachers, that they know that we're going to require masks because it's the right thing to do. So is that possible to get some alignment across the way in which that we refer to the masking policy?
Well, the plan is to see what happens at the end of September. And there is no plan to continue the governor's order once it expires in our school district. What I have told people is that we will continue to work with our health department and continue to work with our medical advisors and see what the circumstances are at that time. I believe that masking will be a very important mitigation strategy throughout the entire school year, but I think it's pretty hard to predict what the conditions might be. We could be in school, we could be out of school. Things could, it'd be terrific if things are a lot better by then. If I was betting on it, I would bet that we will have similar mask requirements after the governor's order expires. But me personally, I'm not ready to commit to that on August 24th.
Chris?
Okay, and I'll move on to another one, but that is a little bit problematic because we just had our Dunn County Department of Health official here who gave us a recommendation that we didn't follow. So there's a lack of confidence on this board being able to follow the recommendations that are given to us by our public health officials. And I believe you said that was also the recommendation of the other two doctors that were involved. So that's very concerning to me that now it's left up to a board to enforce a masking order that we have already shown the will not to enforce based on the recommendations that are given to us by health officials. One thing that is interesting is that I try to look for where the weak link is. And it seems to me that the buses are really a weak link, and it's clear in the high school reopening plan and the middle school reopening plan that they would like to have all those parents who are able to drive their kids and need to be very vocal about that. Because I haven't heard enough about that, but it's in both of their reopening plans. It actually corresponds to the problem that we have with busing, and that is that I can't find any busing that has anything less than 6 feet because of the close proximity of the kids that are on that bus. So I haven't seen, whenever I see any map of what a bus looks like, it's one child per seat. In some cases, it's skipping every other row, like we did that here tonight. So when I see a potentially problematic weak link, now not only is it practicing unsafe sports, but it really is what we're doing about seating on those buses, because if those kids are sharing it on the bus and bringing it into school, that threatens the whole operation. So we need to be really vocal about the fact that we need parents' help on this, and that if we aren't going to be able to maintain safe seating on the buses, we should really think about trying our best to figure out how we get another bus on those routes. Because I believe that when this is discussed before, it was that sometimes there are 2 or 3 kids per seat. And that's not following anybody's guidelines. So that's a weak link that I'm concerned about. And I know some other things that are interesting too, like the logistics of the classroom. It really should be that every kid comes to school, and if they can't afford it, we should be able to provide it for them with their own hand sanitizer. Because what it says in the elementary schools is that after every cough and after every sneeze, the child will either wash their hands or they will use hand sanitizer. Now, the way I understand it is that there's one hand sanitizer dispenser per classroom, or if there's more than one, it's not much more. And if you have children after every sneeze or cough, getting up to use a centralized hand sanitizer, that's problematic, because one, they could, be carrying the disease, and 2, they're moving around the classroom in a way that makes that dangerous for all the other kids that are in that room, especially the teacher. So thinking about what logistically that looks like, I know our teacher's going to solve the problem because most of the heavy lifting of this is actually going to be done by them when they figure out how they're actually going to teach and how they're going to manage the classroom. But I'm worried about that. As I'm also worried about the PPE that is referred to in the opening plans. As you brought up, Dr. Horvath pointed out that the PPEs aren't actually face masks. Those are actually to protect other people. And I'm really worried about the protections that we have for teachers or that we don't have. I was imagining that we would in each classroom, we would have a plexiglass barrier, especially for airborne transmission through the eyes. When kids come up and ask the teachers a question, and they need some help. I see that there's no provision for teachers having a mask, like plexiglass shield. And there's no provisions for teachers having a plexiglass shield in front of their desks as well. So when I think about what that looks like for teachers, I would personally be scared by that. And I would want to think about, okay, is there something we can do as a community to try to address how we protect them and keep them safe? Because unlike us, who we all get 6 feet, our teachers in a very different situation. And then another thing I was thinking about, the way we talked about teachers and how they're represented or not represented in these plans. That's also concerning as well, because I keep on hearing that we're going to start doing some banking for their sick leave, but I never see that happening. And I never see any plan in any of the schools' plans to reach out to the teachers to find out if any of them have any people who are compromised in their home, or if they're compromised, if there's any provisions we can do to look out for them. Because in the middle school and in the high school plan, it's clear that almost all classrooms are going to be not 6 feet. It's stated plainly in both of those, and we should communicate that right to the parents, because what we told them is that most of the classrooms are going to be 6 feet compliant. But when you read the opening plans for the middle school and for the high school, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, they just can't be, and they'll be running up full capacity. So those are just some things I want to think about that I think we could really ratchet down and put together a good plan going forward, but there's some real weak links that we want to think about, especially teachers, busing, and then thinking about the logistics in the classroom, but what we can do to make sure that it can be the safest semester possible given the situation that we're in.
So a couple things. First of all, I appreciate the comments. The staff survey about who needs accommodations, yes, that has gone out. And that was approved by the board with the employee handbook last summer. So that was already completed. Many of the other things that you mentioned were approved last meeting by the board 8-1. And building level plans are made under the plan that the board approved. So the busing, that's in the plan the board approved. The classrooms, that's in the plan the board approved. But yeah, we're going to continue to work with our staffs. The principals are doing a great job communicating with our staffs. And teachers do not even have to wear a face mask if they're given an educational presentation. They're able to maintain 6 feet, which in the classroom, every classroom I've been in, there is a spot for the teacher to be at that can at least have 6 feet, even in the high school and middle school. So all staff members have been provided a face covering. What you mentioned about face coverings not being PPE, that was in the plan that the board approved. I mean, they're in a combined section, but it's clearly called out. So I guess, I'm not sure if the board would like to revisit the entire reopening plan the week before school starts, or we're moving forward with what the board approved.
Chris?
I don't think that my comments were to suggest that we redo the entire reopening plan. The information that we were provided about the buses was that the kids are going to be safe. And so at the time, I understood that to be true. Since then, we've done a lot of research, and it's clear from the CDC guidelines that 6 feet has to be maintained on the buses. They have a whole lot of guidelines for the people that are driving the bus. And when new information arises and that there's new risks that are presented for our children, and that might be a weak link in the plan that we've done, we should be able to adjust the plan. So yeah, we got a plan, but revisiting some of the things might be important. Now, it's clear that in the high school and in the middle school, they state plainly that they need parents to drive their kids to school. So we need to communicate those dangers for the kids, in order that we can kind of make, the best, safest semester possible.
Before you comment, Joe, we did talk about the busing plan in that at the board meeting. One of the things that we talked about was from a rural student standpoint, we didn't think we'd have trouble maintaining the 6-foot spacing requirements. Our concern mainly was as the buses got in town and transported between schools, that's going to be problematic. So I know as a board, we discussed that we would like as many parents as possible that could transport their kids to middle and high school to help alleviate that in-town traffic or bus congestion would be helpful. So I know that we discussed that as a board. Joe?
And Chris, I don't disagree at all. I think as new information comes forward, we definitely should look at it. But if that's the case, then, go ahead and request an agenda item, because we're gonna, like everything else, we work under the purview of what the board approves. What the board approved in the second line of the Menomonie Transportation Operational Plan clearly says, actually it's the third line, parents are strongly encouraged to self-transport students if at all possible. And there's a whole bunch, it's a nice job that the Menomonie Transportation Group did in terms of putting this together. So, yeah, if the board wants to give us a different direction, we're absolutely gonna follow the board's directive, but I think we're kind of talking about something that's already been, approved at this point.
Any other questions, Charlie?
With the number of students that have gone to online, I imagine that the number of kids on the buses will be reduced. We don't know to what extent. Could we do this? Could we ask you to, during that first week of school, somehow monitor the number of kids on the bus, how that's going, report to us at the board meeting, so that we could then decide, hey, we're gonna have to do something different here, to see if those buses are packed. I'm with Chris, that's a concern. If the buses are, half full or less, then maybe it's not a concern. And I don't know at this point what that's going to be. But if the buses are packed, I think we owe it to the kids to do something at that point. So I guess I would suggest that maybe an agenda item come up that we would ask you to report to us to see how it's going.
One thing I'd say, Charlie, maybe rather than an agenda item, I know Menomonie Transportation has been really good to work with as far as bus routing and things of that nature. It might be something as simple as just talking to them and say, hey, can you guys monitor traffic that first week of school and let us know if there's things that are concerning or, buses that are getting crowded and what you guys can do to help alleviate the situation, that kind of stuff. Clint and then Joe.
That's a great idea, Dave, and I think our board representation to Menomonie Transportation should follow up with that.
Joe and then Amy.
Yeah, that's something we do every year. Certainly it's different with COVID, but yeah, the first week of busing is always a challenge. The times are usually delayed. Modifications to the route are made as needed. And I know that Menomonie Transportation will continue to do that. But again, we are encouraging parents to transport if at all possible, or have students walk or bike if at all possible. We think that would be the safest option. So depending on how many people send their kids, we may be able to make adjustments, but we simply don't know that at this time.
Amy?
Big concern I have on the bus is, great, that'd be great if everybody could take their kids to school. There's a lot of essential workers out there, teachers included, that may have to put their children on the bus. And I feel really bad for that because it's like they don't have a choice. And and again, that goes back to equity. I'm really concerned that we're going to have our, students that, are maybe poverty or poor that are going to be the ones that are riding the bus. Not all, but some. And that just concerns me about the equity of. That's all I have to say.
I will say, my wife's here, but I believe our son Brian will be riding the bus, so. But, it's here today. We live out in the country, and for us to get away to drive into town every day is tough, so. Joe?
And just so people realize, now that we're talking about the plan that was approved, there is going to be hand sanitizer that the kids will use as they enter the bus. All students will be masked. Siblings will be seated together. There will be assigned seats. There'll be no food or drink allowed. So there are a number of mitigation measures that will be present. But yeah, I agree. If we're looking at weak links, that perhaps is a weak link in terms of proximity of students. One good thing about the bus is that on most days they can have really good airflow. They can open up the windows and keep fresh air coming in and out quite often. And also, all students should be facing the same direction. So we did talk about potentially having supervisors ride the bus too, and we will do that if Menomonie Transportation feels that need arises. But again, the driver, the kids, everyone will be masked, and I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be okay. But if we would, of course, the best thing would be is if we could send a personal driver for every kid, but I think we all know that that's not possible.
I guess it's the board's pleasure, but we don't meet again until a couple of weeks after school gets going, so if it's okay, if we can have Joe work with the transportation department to monitor that, is that okay?
Yeah, I've got no problem with that. I think the solid things at that level is really great, but would you mind reaching out to Katie Gallagher and trying to figure out what the best, approach would be to trying to find a way to keep our kids safe? Because as Charlie said, that's really what we're looking to do. So rather than, two non-experts, finding out the best, the best outcome given where we're at, try to figure out maybe if there's another way to think about what a seating plan would look like and what that strategy would be like in implementation. So I would strongly encourage you to reach out.
Yes, and we have, and KT has reviewed our entire plan. But yes, we will continue to be in close communication with her. I do think it's also important to note that if there's some real concerns about the staff of this company in this environment. Those drivers will be having temperature checks every day upon coming to work. They'll be screening. In fact, this year, I have a description of each and every route, anticipating that there may be some mornings where routes are canceled. Now, they have backup drivers to the backup, but you all understand that with COVID, it's very easy to go through and, wipe out 4 or 5 drivers from their ability if they're quarantined or isolated for a period of time. So it's not like we can just press a button and have more buses or more drivers available. We do have to somewhat work within the means that we have available.
Chris?
And that's kind of the point, because they're some of the most at-risk people in this system that we got. And if they aren't protected, like with a barrier when the kids get in, we are putting ourselves in a way in which that we've got a lot of problems that go on down the road. It's kind of like, supply chain management. And so thinking about that bus, it's a key piece for us. And it is keeping the bus drivers safe as well, because those kids are going by them and they are, well within what we consider to be a safe distance.
Okay, any other discussion? Jim?
So it's kind of the same question I had with athletic teams, but so in the classroom, it says if a student is diagnosed with COVID, they're supposed to leave right away. What happens with the teacher and the rest of the students? Is there going to be a quarantine? Is that whole class gone for 2 weeks? Do they all have to get tested before they can come back? I looked through it, didn't really see anything here, but you could clarify that.
And Jim, I appreciate that. And these documents are coming through fast and fierce, so I fully appreciate that the board hasn't had a lot of time to review this. Some of these are actually added today. I guess the two that I would point to for those questions, one would be the SDMA guidance for contact tracing, and then also the first link that was the Department of Health Services guidance. It's really going to come down to the contact tracing, and when they interview the teacher or interview the student, a lot of it will depend on age level. If they've been able to keep 6 feet from everybody, and there's nobody that's been within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more cumulative, then it's likely that those people would not need to self-isolate. But the DHS guidance speaks clearly about, they know there's going to be situations, especially high schools, where they're not going to be able to have a full 6 feet. So then it's going to be, okay, we have to have strict seating charts, where were the students located, who was sitting next to them, was it more than 15 minutes? And I think schools, we need to remember, schools are only a piece of this. Our students are gathering consistently. Not all of them, but many of our students are gathering consistently. So the contact tracing, we're certainly going to be part of that. They spend a large part of their day with us. But when we talk about the sports or activities, that will have to be contact traced. But the challenging ones, the most challenging ones, are going to be the activities that are not sanctioned and are not supervised. And I think those are the ones that are going to cause a lot of headache for the health department, which is another reason why I think if we can offer, structured things for our students, even though some of these things might not, meet what some are referred to as the gold standard of physical distancing. I still think that they're gonna be structured activities with supervision and should really aid in that contact tracing.
Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to our next agenda item, 4C, discuss SDMA face covering guidance.
I appreciate Ramey, I appreciate Brian, I appreciate our entire administrative team who have helped put all these opening documents together. Brian created a consistent template, which I think is very helpful, and that includes this guidance on the face mask use. To Chris's question, what happens after September 28th? Because right now it's pretty clear. Our guidance actually goes beyond the governor's order. Because we have some 4-year-olds and some 5-year-olds in our 4K program, we are requiring masks for all those students, even if the governor's order may not apply to them. But in terms of, moving forward after September 28th, if that's something the board would like to implement, all these things are guidelines, all the things from DHS, all the things from CDC, all the things from WIA, other than the governor's order of meeting those requirements at minimum, really there aren't much for orders out there. It's really left to the local organizations to determine what's feasible and what's practical and what's appropriate for the organization. So you can see, we have our guidance here. I think it's well done. We do not have a commitment beyond the governor's order at this point. As you know, prior to the governor's order, the guidance that we had was face masks were required in the school district anytime 6 feet could not be achieved. I don't know if the board wants to make a decision on that. Wait till the September board meeting, maybe talk about it some more. But is there any other feedback or direction in terms of use of face coverings?
Jim?
I just want to say I kind of agree with Chris that we should have a face mask rule through the end of the first semester to be consistent.
And we'll certainly do that if that's what the board directs us to do.
Tanya?
I prefer it to be a discussion item later in September. I don't want to make a choice now.
I guess I myself would agree with Tanya that I'd like to look at least into September and see where things are at, how the common levels are doing, things of that nature. Chris?
We keep on wavering on these things and we keep on waiting for someone else to make our. It seems to me that we keep on waiting for other people to tell us
what to do on this. That's really concerning for me. So I guess I'm at this, I don't know. For me, either you're gonna say we got a masking order for the semester, which is what I've seen most schools do. Because it's not going away in September. It's not gonna be a place where you can be like, yes, we can send our kids to school without any masks. That's just not gonna be there. And when you keep on creating the expectations that, oh yeah, we might make that decision when we can't, that sends some really strange messaging. Now, if you're not gonna say that we need to have masks mandated to keep our teachers and keep our kids safe for the course of the semester, then at the very least, you have to have some information in here that tells you what guidelines you're gonna follow, so that our parents know that we're not gonna, just go with what our feelings are, like we did with the football situation. So what I would really like to see in here is that if they're not gonna say that the SDMA is going to require masks for the semester, then at least we can qualify that by saying we will follow the recommendations that come from the CDC and the Dunn County Board of Health, so that they can be confident that in this decision, we won't, make a decision based on our feelings, but really make a decision that's based on the recommendations that are given to us by the experts.
Kenny and Tanya.
Chris, I really wish I had your crystal ball that I can look into to say, do I agree that COVID will be gone by September? No. But do I think that we need to be taking this step by step versus making a broad range plan now? Yes. If our state government is giving a date of September, what is it, 24th, 28th, whatever it is, 28th. Let's utilize that, but let's take this step by step. I don't think we need to be making a broad picture. Let's look at where our numbers are at in our county. Let's look at our district and our situation versus comparing us to the rest of the state, the rest of the nation, the rest of the world. Menomonie is not the same as Madison. Menomonie is not the same as Oak Mound. Menomonie is not the same as Hudson. And I think we need to take certain things on a case-by-case basis. We're doing things very different than Eau Claire is right now, and I'm confident in the decisions we're making for our students. And so to make that big decision about a full semester of masking or a full semester of something right now, I'm not comfortable with. I think we need to just analyze as we get the information that's brought to us.
Tanya?
Just very similar, Joe, the recommendation of the expert right now is to follow this mandate.
Your mic on.
Oh, sorry. Just to follow what Penny said in a question to Joe, the recommendation of the expert that we're supposed to be following right now is to follow the mandate from the governor until September, whatever. Correct or no?
Oh, and I'm sure that all of our medical advisors would agree.
Sure, but
frankly-
they have not given us any other recommendations at this point after that date.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I don't think we've even talked about it. I think it's a given that
Sure.
we're following the governor's order.
Okay.
Charlie?
Chris, you said when we talked about athletics that we didn't listen to the experts. I would counter to you that we listened and we weighed the items differently. You weighed it differently than I did, but I listened to and looked at a set of values, if you will, and you looked at the same set of values and came to a different conclusion, and I think that's okay. But to say that we didn't listen to the expert, I don't agree with you. Now I'm going to surprise you and say I do agree with you as far as masks are concerned for the semester. And the reason that I say that is because when we were talking about athletics, I talked with Dr. Walker. And Dr. Walker convinced me that masks are where it's at. More so than 6 feet of social distancing. More so than most of the other things that you can do. Masks are where it's at. So to say the end of the semester, I would be okay with that. To go to the end of the year, I don't know that I would be okay with that at this point. But to say the end of the semester, I think that's reasonable. It's not on the agenda as a decision tonight, but that's where I would come down on it at this point. I was convinced that that's where we should be going, but that's just my opinion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, let's move on. Item D, policies 171.2, agenda preparation and dissemination, first reading. I did get additional feedback from Charlie. You want to explain what you did, Charlie, and why I did had Joe send this out to the board? It's on there, added August 24th, but you kind of summarized the ones that had come in and put it out there.
The attachment is the one that says updated 171.2 Schneider.
Bottom right?
Yep.
So what I did was I took most of the recommendations from what we received Thursday afternoon and kind of put them together. I didn't take all the recommendations because some of the recommendations were counter to what I had originally suggested. So I did take some of them into account. That's how I would propose the policy to be written. And that's again, my thoughts on whether, where that goes. Up to the rest of the board.
Further discussion? Amy?
I thought that Charlie's changes were well written, and I'd like to see those come back to the board for a vote at the next meeting. I think he summarized what everyone was trying to say quite well, condensed it down so it wasn't so cumbersome, and I don't necessarily agree with a form, quote unquote, per se, just in the guidelines. This will carry through, Dave, your presidency and many others until it gets amended again. So I think it's a good document.
Thank you. Chris?
The only
question I had was at the last meeting, Clint, made the point that we would all benefit from everybody, giving some background to what it is that they're proposing, and that he suggested that Joe would be involved in this too as the administrator. So if we have to do it, Joe would have to do it. And I'm not sure how much more work it would be because you're already so well prepared for these meetings. But the same information that you're requesting of us when we make additions to the agendas, I would appreciate if we would include the administrator in that as well. Because it serves the same purpose. Sometimes it's not clear exactly what the point is behind some of the items we put on the agenda are.
Thanks, Chris. I'm gonna disagree with you pretty strongly on that one. I think our superintendent has always done a very good job of informing us, and he's been very open. If we have questions or about anything on the agenda, I'm not going to be afraid to contact him about them. I don't want to make all the agenda items that we have on here to make Joe go through the hoops and fill out paperwork and stuff like that. I think the intent behind this was not to have agenda items put forth to the board with no background. I think that's the original start of Tanya, some of the stuff that came up from that. So I guess I'd be against that change. Any other discussion? Tanya?
Just a small, before they come back, it'll be cleaned up, but like, board president is capitalized in all the right places and that such, right?
You say it one more time, I couldn't hear you very well.
No, just in regards to grammar and spelling and capitalization, just that it's consistent. So if we do board president capitalized, we should make sure that all the sentences are board president capitalized.
You get after Chinese grammar?
Jamie will go through it.
I figured she put her.
Try to keep the formatting consistent with.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Okay, we'll break. Jim?
I just think this is really unnecessary. I think it's gonna be a complete waste of time.
Thanks, Jim. Any other comments? Okay, we'll bring it back next meeting as an action item. Item 4E, correction of previously discussed private school voucher information. Chris?
Yeah, this is my bad. I can't believe I made a mistake. But when I was talking about the voucher program information that was provided by Margaret Reich, I stated, and I still can't believe it, that St. Joe's was taking vouchers. They are not. They've got no plans to. I went to a Catholic school myself. It in no way is part of St. Joe's plan. And also, just because St. Paul's is taking vouchers doesn't mean there's anything wrong with them. What it does mean is there's something wrong with their state legislature that's making two publicly funded education systems. So if I had a private school, I would no doubt have my students apply for vouchers as well. So when I made comments about, my position on vouchers and what it's costing taxpayers, what it's costing our students in public school, that's for real. And I have no way mean to criticize those schools, even if they were to take vouchers, which of course St. Joe's is not. Sorry, I made a mistake.
Thanks, Chris, appreciate that. Item 4F, WASB resolution related to private school vouchers. I believe, Chris, this was your agenda item.
I wish that I had filled out the form so I could better represent what my plans are, but I know we discussed this numerous times, and I was hoping that we could put together several members to create a document that represents our school board's position on vouchers, and that can make a public statement about the costs of vouchers to our students in the district. So I was hoping that by reading some of the information that Margaret is so good. I mean, she's so good. Clearly illustrating that even though the Supreme Court stated that we could not deny vouchers going to private schools when they're religious institutions, that only one of the 142 schools wasn't a religious school. And that the real effects is that this money that's for state public education, which should not be going to religious education, is in the state of Wisconsin. So we should be able to make a comprehensive statement on this, and I would love to work with Joe on this. because he's made lots of really insightful comments on this, to make a statement on a board, especially since the yearly costs are gonna be going up. What did Leah project? 99,000 in the next school year, and this year was $64,000. I mean, it's costing us now, so I think we should really make a statement on that.
Joe?
Chris, I'd be happy to work with you, and I don't disagree that I'm concerned about the idea of state funds going to the voucher program. Just to be clear though, a couple times now you said that this is costing our students. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Just across the state, if there's a pool of money, and they pay out the vouchers first. So in the big picture, there's not a one-to-one dollar amount, and Margaret has done such a nice job illustrating to us what it's actually costing us. It's not that it's costing any particular student, but when you think about the amount of money that the state spends on education, they take that money off the top, and then whatever's left then goes to the state schools. So I should be more specific about that, about the way in which that mechanism operates. So supposing that that money that the school sets aside for education would then be spent on public schools, that money that's taken off the top costs public education in the state of Wisconsin.
The only thing I'd point out is that if we didn't have private schools in the state, there'd be a lot more kids in public schools, and then the cost of education in private schools is actually lower to some extent than public schools. I'm concerned about the amount of time that Joe has with schools opening up right now and working, preparing a document. I'll let you make the call, Joe, but.
No, I'm happy to work on it. I don't know if we'll be able to do it here in the next couple of weeks, but I'd absolutely be interested in continuing the discussion about vouchers. But I think it's important to be accurate. And I think the taking off the top comment, I think probably want to look a little bit on how the vouchers are funded and make sure we're representing it fairly.
Any other comments? Charlie?
Couple of things to go with the accuracy comment. Be careful on the one of 252 schools not associated with religion. That it's actually closer to 10, which isn't a big deal, but nonetheless, the number is not completely accurate. Secondly, the 50% number seems to be somewhat random. I would rather see something like limited to their tuition, their normal tuition, or something like that, rather than a 50% number. You know, again, it seems somewhat random. Other than that, I'd be in favor of it.
Any other discussion? Okay, item H, we're getting to the end. Items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. G, and this is the extracurricular staff contract request. Anybody, any questions? Item H. Okay. Item H, review items related to next meeting dates, board committees, and reports. Anybody have any questions? Our next meeting is September 14th at the ASC office at 5:30 p.m. With that, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Chris, second. Jim, all those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
The Nate there on your way out. Oh, leave him on the table? Okay.